For today, we are going to be talking about two specific concepts of instructional design. The first one that we are going to focus on is the value of active learning in instructional design and the constructivist lens in the learning environment. Active learning and constructivism are very similar to one another. They coexist with one another, have very similar definitions. So I thought that it was fitting that we talk about both of them cohesively. To begin, we're going to talk about the definition of active learning. According to Stapleton and Stefaniak 2018 on page 2, learners must have the opportunity to explore. So an example of this exploration process would be things like sharing prior experiences that the student had in relation to the content. So making those connections helps to enhance engagement for students, make them feel like they are wanting to move forward with that process. And additionally, according to Reeser and Dempsey 2017 on page 269, active learning requires students to engage meaningfully, cognitively, and emotionally with other students, the task assigned, and the materials or resources used to complete the task. So not only using materials and making connections with those materials, but also collaborating and working with students and the task specifically to make connections and deepen their understanding of concepts. We then move into constructivism. So for constructivism, there are three specific learning achievements or learning targets that are discussed in Reeser and Dempsey 2018. Learning is an active process of meaning making gained in and through our experience and interactions with the world. And that is where we see that connection between constructivism and active learning. The second thing, learning opportunities arise as people encounter cognitive conflict or challenge and through naturally occurring as well as planned problem-solving activities. So students have to think critically and go through an inquiry process. And then the third point, learning is a social activity involving collaboration, negotiation, and participation in authentic practices of communities. Again, this is very similar to active learning in that we are focusing on the collaboration piece to work towards achieving understanding and working very hands-on with the tasks at hand. We then have a table that is given to us from Reeser and Dempsey. It is Table 7.1, Constructivism expressed as a set of prescriptions for designing instruction. So if you look on the left-hand side, we have things like the problem, the environment, the learner's role, and then the instructor's role. And it kind of dives into what each of those things are in terms of constructivism. So for example, the problem, designing instruction around a problem or a small set of problems that is authentic, complex, and rich, or wicked. So with many possible framings, solution paths, and solutions. So students are presented with a problem and it is up to them to kind of come up with and work towards a solution. Then for our environment, as educators, we want to make sure that we're creating a conducive learning environment that is similar to real world situations so they can apply those concepts and things that they learned in the real world. Then we have the learner's role, which is encouraging learner ownership by highlighting the relevance of the problem and encouraging pursuit of interest. That is where we are working towards engaging students in the content. And we also want to grant learners the main responsibility for knowledge advancement. So we're placing that responsibility in the students' hands through problem-solving techniques, providing opportunities for social interaction, communication, and collaborative teams, and encouraging learner reflection. Because even if students fail, they can still grow and learn through that experience and ultimately become successful through those failures. And on the flip side, we have the instructor's role. So instructors kind of take a step back a little bit more. We emphasize guidance and we facilitate. So we are on the side rather than being the ones who are going through the motions and telling the students what to do. We want to make sure that we are helping students focus on their engagement, and we want to make sure that we are helping students build on their prior knowledge. Then we have, why is active learning and constructivism necessary? The importance of active learning and constructivism in the classroom is that it allows students to build their own knowledge through questioning, exploration, and discovery. And through that engagement in hands-on activities, students gain knowledge and retain deeper understanding of processes. When they are asked to do things directly, then it helps them to understand and retain that information. And finally, the implementation in the classroom. What can I do as an educator? There are several different strategies that you can implement within your classroom. One of them being blended learning, so utilizing both in-class opportunities as well as integration of technology. We have a flipped classroom where lessons are presented in an online format, and then when students are in class, they're working on hands-on problem-solving solutions. We have peer instruction, so that is where peers are instructing and guiding their peers. We have case method, problem-based learning, project-based learning, and gamification in the classroom, and that is where we utilize different games, educational games in the classroom to assist with learning that aligns with your curriculum. And last but not least, the benefits of the constructivist approach. The integration of technology allows for a wider variety of methods to reach students' needs. So if you are doing things like blended learning, flipped classroom, gamification, project-based learning, all of those things incorporate technology, and it allows students to kind of gain a deeper understanding of things through their direct interactions with that technology. It allows for diversity and inclusiveness. If you are incorporating those kinds of things, you are able to cater to specific students' needs. It is engaging for learners. Students learn problem-solving techniques that can be used in both educational and outside contexts. The goal is that we are teaching students things that they can learn and apply in real-life experiences, and then students learn to take responsibility for their activities and decisions. Our first module discussed active learning and constructivism. Our second module is going to dive a little bit deeper into that and see how we can apply that with a specific learning model. And this learning model is called the quality teaching model. To begin with, we're going to talk about what quantitative values are versus qualitative values in the educational setting. So an example of a quantitative value would be things like data that is collected to guide instruction. Some of those examples of data can include things like demographics, so socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity, those kinds of things. We also have number of students with free and reduced lunch, which falls under the category of socioeconomic status. We have rates of student success in classrooms, school, district, county, city, state, etc. We have assessment scores and state testing scores. The importance of a quantity value in education is that it is helpful to improve student learning and retention of knowledge. When educators are able to look back at the data and statistics, they can apply that and come up with a goal or a plan to put into place moving forward to ensure that students are successful. When we focus our lens to qualitative values, then what we are doing is we're focusing on higher quality teaching, not necessarily the teachers themselves, but how we can make sure that teaching is high quality. We are integrating and explaining content in a way that is conducive to the learning environment. Qualitative values enhance students' learning experiences, and they are necessary to improve student learning and retention. So what is the quality teaching model? The quality teaching model aims to support teachers in useful ways to create best practices in the classroom. So some of those examples are enhancing the intellectual quality of lessons that are created and administered. There is an obligation to be accountable for investment in schooling, teacher education, and intended outcomes within school settings. We also want to make sure that we're focusing on approaches to teaching, mindsets that the teachers have, and goals set by the teachers. And there is also an emphasis on the environment, because you want to make sure that you are fostering a space filled with respect and rapport and fostering an environment where students feel comfortable in their learning experience. So with the quality teaching model, breaking it down a little bit, there are 3 specific dimensions, and then there are 18 elements that fall under those 3 dimensions. So the first dimension that we have is intellectual quality. So within that category, we have things like deep knowledge, deep understanding, problematic knowledge, higher order thinking, meta language, and substantive communication. For a quality learning environment, you have things such as explicit quality criteria, engagement, high expectations, social support, student self-regulation, and student direction. And then finally, we have significance, so things like background knowledge, cultural knowledge, knowledge integration, inclusivity, connectedness, and narrative. So this model here is what teachers and the classroom as a whole are assessed on, where the classroom ranks, kind of looking through these 18 different elements. So implementation in classrooms, what can you do as an educator to ensure that you are teaching at a quality level to help students with their learning and their understanding? We want to make sure that we are reflecting on and evaluating current teaching practices. Then, with that being said, working to implement critical thinking skills that emphasize innovation and creativity. You also want to make sure that you're emphasizing multiple strategies and learning methods because differentiation is so important. Not every single student learns the same way, so we need to be aware of that and work towards reaching every single student. You also want to make sure that you are including that quantity portion where we are collecting and observing data and the impact that certain programs have on students. If they are effective and they are conducive to the learning environment, then in what ways can you continue to implement those programs? And if they are not working well, they are not effective, then what things need to change or be modified in order to assure that students are being able to be successful. Then we also want to make sure that we are encouraging collaboration. And this also includes educators collaborating with their colleagues. And finally, improving culture through understanding, respect, and rapport. And again, that not only goes for educators creating an environment where students feel like they can do these things, but also creating a space where educators are able to collaborate with their colleagues as well and have a sense of a strong culture. And then we have the benefits of the quality teaching model. So the quality teaching model allows educators to see their strengths and weaknesses through student understanding. So rather than placing the emphasis on the teachers, it is on the teaching itself. And you can reflect through your processes based on what your students know and understand. It highlights the importance of effective teaching strategies. And it helps educators see the value in their connections and why connection and content are aligned. There is also always room for growth. So you are able to focus on the ways that you teach rather than you are as a teacher. And it rethinks how you want to teach. And it shows that teaching and learning are interconnected with one another because you cannot teach if you are not able to learn as well.